Imagine a world where every act, every decision, and every consequence is predestined, set in stone by an all-knowing entity. Would you still consider yourself free? Welcome to the paradoxical world of the biblical story of Pharaoh and the 10 plagues, a narrative that has sparked heated debates among scholars, theologians, and philosophers for centuries. On one side of the debate, we have those who believe in the concept of divine determinism, the belief that God, being omniscient, predetermines every event, action, and outcome. They argue that in the story of the Pharaoh, God hardened Pharaoh's heart, thus making it impossible for him to free the Israelites. This, they say, shows God's absolute control over human will and destiny. On the other hand, there are those who champion the idea of free will. They argue that Pharaoh, despite God's influence, still had the choice to let the Israelites go or not. They contend that Pharaoh's hardened heart was a result of his own stubbornness and pride, not God's interference. Who's right? Well, that's where things get interesting. The divine determinism camp cites numerous biblical passages where it is explicitly mentioned that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. They argue that the language used leaves no room for interpretation. God directly influenced Pharaoh's decision-making, thereby negating any semblance of free will. In contrast, the free will advocates point to other biblical passages where Pharaoh is said to have hardened his own heart. They argue that this implies Pharaoh's agency in the matter, suggesting that he was not merely a puppet in God's hands, but a man making his own choices. The debate intensifies when we bring in the moral implications. If God indeed hardened Pharaoh's heart, does it make him responsible for the suffering caused by the 10 plagues? The divine determinism camp argues that God, being the creator of all, has the right to orchestrate events as he sees fit. The free will camp, however, sees this as a moral quandary, arguing that if God influenced Pharaoh's decisions, then he shares responsibility for the subsequent suffering. In summary, the story of Pharaoh and the 10 plagues presents a complex and contentious debate about the nature of free will and divine determinism. One side sees God as the puppet master, pulling the strings of history, while the other believes in the autonomy of the individual, even in the face of divine influence. The moral implications of each viewpoint further fuel the debate, questioning the nature of God's responsibility and the suffering that ensued. So with all these viewpoints in mind, where do you stand in this debate? Remember, this isn't about finding the definitive answer, but about engaging with the complexities of the narrative and the questions it raises. After all, it's these thought-provoking stories that make history, philosophy, and theology such fascinating fields to delve into,